if you think that because Putin pays attention to battlefield effects, that these sanctions are going to impede him and either help Ukraine or harm Russia, and that's going to change something on the battlefield, I mean, that's just a fantasy. I mean, it's not accurate to say there's no evidence to support that. It's accurate to say there is overwhelming evidence to refute that. They don't, all these sanctions, all these 18 rounds of sanctions, the total cumulative of 16,000 sanctions that the U.S. has on Russia dating back many, many, many years, they obviously have no impact because Russia continues to move forward. They're not going to, because Russia has largely made itself self-contained. Or, as Dmitry Peskov put it, they're kind of used to it.
We have been living under a lot of sanctions for a long time. Our economy is functioning under a lot of restrictions. That's why, of course, we have a certain amount of immunity. We continue to record all the statements that come from President Trump, from other international representatives.
That's their statement that came out today, is that they will record the statements made by Trump. So they hear him, because apparently Dmitry Peskov was asked today about Trump's comment there about the 10-day being set for this today, the timeline of the clock starts today, and also on 9 August is when it reaches up, and they're like going, okay, we've recorded that. It's like the United States, how we sometimes say, noted. Got it. 9 August. We'll see you then. They're not going to pay any attention to that at all, of course. You've had Dmitry Medvedev. We showed you in an exchange with Lindsey Graham yesterday where he's basically mocking the United States. And why wouldn't they? Because everything we've thrown at them has fallen short of the promises. Everything. Battlefield effects, physical weapon systems, ammunition, sanctions, attempts to diplomatically isolate Russia. Everything has fallen short. And so Russia sees that it's moving closer and closer to the ground, to its objectives here. And they say, listen, we're not going to change anything that we're doing here unless you're willing to change what you're going to talk about at the negotiations. That's why Russia says we're willing to have phone calls with Putin, with Trump. We'll have more if that works, if that's useful. We'll have talks and conversations directly with Ukraine. Apparently, they would even talk to Zelensky himself, although there's some dispute over whether it would be a Putin and Zelensky meet. Apparently, Russia has signaled that they wouldn't do that unless there was ready to be some kind of an agreement, which I don't see from the Zelensky side there's any possibility of that anytime soon. So what does that leave us then today, and where is that almost certainly going to leave us on the 9th of August? It's where we were today. It's where we were on the 13th of July before Trump even made his 50-day declaration. The same place we are right now. It's Russia is going to ignore what we say. They're going to see what we do. They're going to take countermeasures that they have resourced. They're going to continue to escalate their ability to produce weapons of war, to produce the kinds of ammunition and stockpiles that they need to be able to prosecute this. And they will continue to methodically destroy Ukraine, because we're going to almost certainly going to continue on down the path we have, which is to ignore anything that Russia says, that we're not going to listen to any of their positions, that we're not going to pay the slightest attention to them. And we're going to just hope in these fantasy outcomes, like Lindsey Graham's talking about. We're going to put a whooping on Russia, just like we did on Iran. We're not. And that China controls Russia, which they don't. And that Putin's going to pay attention to these. We've reached an inflection point, says Jack Keane. No, we haven't. There's no inflection point. There's no change. It's all this is just continued, in my view, the humiliation of the Western world. Because you have what has always been self-described as the greatest military power in the history of the world in the United States. And that we have the greatest deal maker that there's ever been in Donald Trump. And that we have the greatest military alliance in NATO that's ever existed in the history of the world. All of it has fallen flat and failed to bring Russia to heel. None of it has worked. All of our diplomacy fell apart. And you can go all the way back to the disastrous events of January and February of 2014, when we backed an uprising that overthrew the legally elected government in Ukraine. because they wanted, that government of Yanukovych wanted to pivot towards Moscow and away from the European Union. Many of the people in Ukraine didn't like that. There was a revolt, turned into violence, and then they ended up driving that guy to power. We supported that. Instead of saying we support the rule of law, only the Ukrainian people can determine whether they're going to go, we'll go with whatever comes out. That would have been the right thing to do, but it's not what we did. We specifically involved ourselves with making sure that outcome happened because that's what we wanted. We didn't care about the rule of law. We didn't care about democracy or any of that stuff. We supported the overthrow of the legally elected government, period, point blank. It doesn't matter. And then, of course, we get into the Minsk agreements. We supported that. But apparently the Western leaders never intended for that to happen. We said we're going to continue to move forward with NATO closer and closer to Russia's border. We specifically said Ukraine and Georgia, we're going to ad infinitum. We've been failing from the beginning. Everything we try to do to harm Russia and to build up our side has backfired. And there's no reason to think that's going to change anytime soon, because now then Russia's basically not even attempting any kind of diplomacy with us because they no longer trust us. Our word has fallen short too many times, or been directly contradicted, or we said one thing and did another. And now then, they're just not going to have it anymore. They still don't want a war with the West. They don't want to escalate this because they know it could go nuclear, which would be catastrophic and destructive for Russia. So they don't want to do that. So they're not going to act irrationally in their interest. They're going to continue to push it, but they will not act in our interest and they will not trust us. So the chance of us actually accomplishing and getting any kind of negotiated settlement on the best terms available has nearly no chance to succeed because of our position and our history. And so the only thing that we're leaving Russia then, because they can't trust us, is to militarily conquer Ukraine. It could take a long time. I don't know. I mean, I've thought that the Ukraine army would have buckled before now. They still haven't. There's getting fewer of them. The fabric is getting thinner, so it could still happen. But they could also hang on for a lot longer. Maybe it goes a year, maybe a year and a half. It's hard to imagine any chance it could go much beyond that, even in the most extreme circumstance. But it is possible. Russia can. If it goes that long, Russia has no problem. Even according to our own analysis of late, we calculate that Russia can continue on at the current pace at least through the end of year 2027. Not even just next year, but the year after that. There's no chance that the Ukraine side can do that. They just won't have the manpower, let alone all the other armaments, because the West in cumulative cannot meet the demand. Russia can. So that's where this is. That's where it's going. 9 August is going to be the 10 days. 10 August is probably not going to be any different than 8 August was going to be. That's just where we are, folks. And we're going to continue to be unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you this information. And we're going to lay it all out there for you. This is not just me giving my opinion. Everything is resourced and cited here. So you have physical evidence to back up all these things. It's not rocket science. I'm not some intellectual, brilliant person. I can just do basic math and I can do basic analysis that's grounded on the reality on the ground, an observable evidence we can see, observable history, and all of these things put together lead you to this conclusion. There's just no other way that this can manifest itself. And unfortunately, the further we go down with this unwillingness, I don't know if it's unwillingness or inability to see the reality and clinging to the fiction that by strength of personality or because we want it to be this way, I don't know which. We're certainly laying the foundation for a bad outcome for our side. But we'll see how it's going to work out. We're going to continue to stay with it. And by the way, we have Larry Johnson coming back on this afternoon at 3:00. He's going to have some interesting takes on some of this other things that are happening with the Russia-Ukraine war, but also about what's going on in the Middle East. Always entertaining to see Larry Johnson. Join us back today at 3 p.m. on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.